it's not an easy job, but the stuff you learn down there is what prepares you for all the other stuff. Look, if it was easy, the FBI would be doing it, right, Mark? That's exactly right.
Yeah, I had no idea. I had no idea about the ins and outs of the Department of State. It was just something it was just like something abstract that I heard about on TV. But no, I have an appreciation for what they actually do now that I've worked hand in hand with those folks.
Not that we're always in agreement with them, but they do have a tough job.
Without a doubt, that diplomacy is important.
Well, we were going to talk about this, but since we're here, let's talk about this, because you talked about there's a couple things you want to talk about, but let's not do it after. Let's talk about the work you did on the African continent, because that was one of the things you wanted to talk about, right? Some of the work you did there. Let's talk about that real quick before we talk about Operation Relentless.
Right. Okay. So obviously I was, I retired as a senior executive and regional director for the Africa continent, where I supervised 10 offices. I was first based in Rabat, Morocco. And then I moved my regional office to Cape Town, South Africa for my last 2 years. Because what was happening in Morocco wasn't resonating with the U.S. Embassy there, because under the State Department, Morocco comes under the umbrella of the Bureau of Near Eastern Affairs. And when I moved to South Africa, my office came under the Bureau of African Affairs for the State Department. So, and also South Africa is an English-speaking country. Morocco is both French and Arabic-speaking, and therefore it was an easy adjustment for my staff. And most of my offices in Sub-Saharan Africa, most of my offices were in Sub-Saharan Africa and not North Africa. And so obviously, working on the continent was a wonderful experience. But I'll talk about you want me to talk about a couple of cases specifically?
No, I just wanted to set context. Let's do that, because let's talk about you going to Thailand, because what we want to do is spend some time on talking about this stuff, because it was real interesting. I had no idea. I mean, I know that you have to do a lot of work, but I had no idea when we were going to talk to you that you'd been that extensively involved. So now, Thailand, what country was that for you? Was that your third or fourth country? That
was my third assignment. And I was actually selected as a non-senior executive regional director when I went there. So I was the executive assistant for the chief of operation, and he sent me over there. At that particular time, they didn't have the position on the books for a senior executive. So initially they gave me the position of regional director at a lower grade. So they paid me less, but they made me do
That's what
work.
I was about to say. You got the rank, not the pay.
Right,
yeah.
Right. And so later on, they bumped the position up, and then they had a senior executive come over there. But at the time in which I did the work on Operation Relentless, that person was out of the country, and so I kind of handled that thing, and I handled that thing with the arms trafficker we're going to talk about based on my previous experience from my other posts, from my other assignments. But
let's talk about that, because when we had talked with Zach, obviously there's the Special Operations Division in DEA, and they'll get some unique assignments. But they tried taking Viktor Bout down in a couple different countries. I think one of them was Romania, and they didn't work out. So Thailand became like the place to go. When was the first you learned? Because it's interesting you say that too, because one of the places Viktor Bout sold a lot of arms and ammunition was the African continent. I mean, he put tons of ammo and weapons out there. When did you first become aware of Viktor Bout? Was it just this operation, or did you know about him before?
I did not know about him before. I had some knowledge of the movie Lord of War with Nicolas Cage, which was based on him. But
Yuri Orlov, we asked.
Yeah. I had
Nicolas Cage. Oh my God.
I had no knowledge of him at all. And then, like, for some of your listeners who might have not heard Zach's presentation, it's important that we give some kind of context, if you agree, that he was arguably the number one arms trafficker in the world when we arrested him in 2008. He was known as the Merchant of Death. And
according to the UN, his arms and ammunition were responsible for the deaths of 6 million people on the African continent.
Absolutely. He had been sanctioned by the U.S. Treasury Department as an international arms dealer and war profiteer. He had been sanctioned by the United Nations Security Council for violating U.S. embargoes in Angola and Sierra Leone. He was providing weapons to the Taliban and conflict zones throughout the world, even that end up with child soldiers in Africa. So you name it, as far as significant illegal arms trafficking is concerned. He was kind of behind it, and I can give that, if you want me to give that backstory now, what actually took place after we got notified that the DEA Special Operations Division wanted our assistance in trying to capture this guy.
And just for our listeners that haven't heard Zach's story, it's episode 19 that came out in October 21. So go back and listen, and you'll get the whole story about.
And we actually did a follow up with Zach. It was on Patreon. I think we released it though on our regular podcast, but we did after Viktor Bout was traded for Brittany Griner. We did a follow up to that because he was actually asked to be on the news and talk about that. But yeah, because the reason you go into this, you don't know what's going on. You're in Thailand you don't know about Viktor Bout, I should say. How long are you in Thailand before this cable or something comes out that says, "Hey, we need your help"?
About a year and a half and maybe 2 years at that particular time. Yeah.
So you had the chance to build up a lot of relationships
with the Thais.
With the Thai.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about how this goes down. I mean, because this is going to be similar to any other operation. Somebody's coming into your country, but how did you first? What was the context? What was the setup for this to where you started getting involved? And how much lead time did you have before this thing was going to go down?
Well, it was a few weeks, but it didn't take long to go down. When it finally went down, it went down quickly. But some of the backstory of it is that people don't realize. I was assigned to Bangkok. And now at that particular time, I was the acting regional director, and at post at the mission there, we had a Department of Justice attorney who we called a DOJ legal advisor. And in Thailand, this DOJ legal advisor was responsible for coordinating high-profile investigations such as extraditions that were in the United States government's best interest. Well, just prior to this is important. Just prior to this investigation on Viktor Bout, this legal advisor had lost an extradition ruling in the Thai courts on an Iranian named Jamshid Qasemi on a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement investigation. And Qasemi was able to return to Iran. He had been indicted in the United States for weapons trafficking and money laundering. And so this is the part
that doesn't sound so good yet.
Right,
it doesn't sound good with Viktor now.
So when you have SOD, the DEA Special Operations Division calling us, it's like they don't have this context, right? Mm-hmm. They just saying, make it happen.
Hey, but rewind for a second before you get to that. Why did they lose the extradition case? What was it about the Thai courts that made it so tough to get? This guy's an Iranian. Iran is a state sponsor of terror. Right. What was it? Why was it so tough for the courts to rule on that?
I don't have in-depth knowledge on what specific took place in this investigation. I do know this based on my experience. A lot of times there are other factors that ain't public that come into play with these cases. There might be corruption. There might be all type of issues. I have experienced, even with Viktor Bout, the pressure that's put on a country like Thailand from a government is incredible. So you never know what things are what's going on behind the scenes between a relationship with country A and country B. So I can't give you the specific reasons why they lost that specific request for that person to be extradited to the United States. But I do know one thing. That our legal advisor, the DOJ legal advisor, who's an attorney, he didn't want to have nothing to do with a case like this ever again. And here we were.
Here we are. Guess what I got for you? Another case.
Right. Right. So what I did, and he had made it known to the United States ambassador, and his name was Eric John at the time, and to the deputy chief of mission, Jim Entwistle. He made it known. To them, he said the Thai government does not want to do another case like this. Once again, you never know what's going on behind the scenes as far as the pressure that's exerted by country A over country B. But so he was like, before we even knew about Viktor Bout, he was trying to lay the groundwork with the United States ambassador and the deputy chief of mission. We don't want to do another case like this, right? And so that's why I wanted to explain to you guys some of the intricacies of what took place that these other guys don't appreciate. And they just think when we come, you're just supposed to make it happen for DEA. And so he had told the ambassador that the Thais didn't want to do another case like this. And so it was really himself who didn't want to be put in that position again. So that was in the back of my mind when the Special Operations Division came calling. And they, through their informants and an unwitting, Bout had agreed, obviously, to come to Thailand to meet with members of the FARC, or the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, a narco-terrorist organization. And fortunately, these FARC members were actually 2 DEA informants. And knowing that the legal advisor was now gun-shy about a case like this, no pun intended, me and the supervisory agent that worked for me, we went and met with a gentleman named Charchai, who was the director of the Thailand Office of Narcotics Control Board. And he carried a lot of juice within Thailand, a lot of juice. And so we went to him first. And then we also knew we needed approval for the enforcement element of this operation. And we went to a General Pongpat, who was the commander of the crime suppression division of the Royal Thai Police. So we gave them both briefings of this, and they both concurred to assist us with this investigations and an anticipated operation. So General Pongpat just requested that I send him something in writing. So I sent them a letter in writing. And I then prepared a really long memo for the signed approval of the U.S. ambassador and the deputy chief of mission. And I attached all the supporting documentation, including the Treasury designation and the UN sanctions. And then I when I briefed the ambassador, I told him that I already had Thai government approval, and he told me just to coordinate with the DOJ legal advisor, and then he signed the memo. So I kind of cleaned things up before it actually happened and stuff.
Well,
so.
You came in top down on that advisor, because once the ambassador signs off on it,
exactly.
I'm good with that. As we've talked about in other episodes, the ambassador is the representative, is the president,
right,
in that country.
Right. And so those are the kind of things that these guys, when they come and request us to do something, they don't know what all the crap we got to go through to make something like this happen. But I kind of just, like I said, is the fact that I had previous foreign experience. It helped me as far as my decision making to try to, to make something like this happen.
Well, and that's one of the beautiful things about DEA is when our guys go overseas, you get off your butts, you go out there and you make the contacts, you develop these relationships. This is not something you do by just going over and meeting a guy once a month, once a quarter or whatever. You got to go out to lunch with him. You got to meet his family, maybe go out to dinner. You got to wine and dine these guys a little bit. But then, and that's how they build up respect for you. So that when you do get these, remember we used to call these drive-by taskings that headquarters
right.
would come out with,
right. Under Karen Tandy specifically.
Yeah, baby, and that's why SOD was able to call Andre over here with all his experience and especially his contacts, being able to make things happen. And that's one of the things that makes DEA so damn successful, and that's just the honest to God's truth.
And unfortunately, sometimes we have DEA leadership who haven't been assigned overseas. They don't appreciate what their own workforce are capable of doing. There's a lack of appreciation for what we do in that arena. For instance, we had a DEA and the predecessor agencies had a 40-year relationship with the Royal Thai Police, going back 40 years, the Bureau of Narcotics and Dangerous Drugs. So that's the way we were able to get things done. And at that particular time, when Bout was taken into custody, I don't know if Zach talked about this, there was no provisional arrest warrant in place with the Thai government when we arrested him in the hotel room. And he was negotiating with our informants to provide 100 man-portable air defense systems and other material support to shoot down U.S. aircraft and kill Americans in Colombia. But because we had that relationship, they allowed 2 of our agents to swear to affidavits in Thai court to be used to keep Bout in custody until the provisional arrest warrants could be executed. And that took a few days. So allowing foreign agents to swear to an affidavit in a foreign court is like kind of unheard of, but it just goes to show you the cooperation we had with the Thai government.
Absolutely.
So if you're putting on a scale, because obviously it's all about relationships. Like I used to tell my kids, it's not what you know, it's who you know, and it's not who you know, it's who I know. Right. And so the relationships are key to this. But how much did those relationships, had it not been for those relationships, was Viktor Bout a sufficiently bad enough guy that it would have tipped the scales, or did you need the power of those relationships to make sure the scale tipped to where you could get those provisional arrest warrants and extradite
You
him?
had to have those relationships because the pressure that the Russian government put on the Thai government is incredible. And so once again, that's why I said I don't know specifically what happened in the case regarding the Iranian arms trafficker that just preceded this investigation. And so it's just, ultimately, I guess the Thais probably made the decision that ultimately Viktor Bout was coming into their country to facilitate a crime. I would like to think that because he was coming in their country to facilitate a crime, that they decided that he should be extradited to the United States
versus a bad guy who just happened to be in their country that committed no crime other than just being a fugitive.
Right. But there was a lot of pressure put on the Thai government so they're in between. The Thais are like, what do we do here? We want to maintain our relationship with the United States, and we want to maintain our relationship with the Russian government. What do we do here? And I actually had left the country. My tour was over. I left the country, and I was kind of skeptical that it was ever going to happen because we were finding out all kind of things in the back channels about potential bribery and everything else that I can't even talk about here that we became aware of. And I got to the point I thought he was never going to be extradited to the United States.
It was like, what, a year and a half? I don't remember.
This was, we arrested him early 2008. I left in December 2009. So it was about 2 years.
Yeah.
It was like 2 years before he was sent back, and he was convicted and received, a 25-year sentence. And of course, recently he was, exchanged for Brittany Griner. And one of the
it's interesting. I want to play off that for a second. I do a lot of presentations. I talk about Russian tactics and doctrine and war and cyberspace and stuff. But I asked them, and I asked them for show of hands. I said, guys, not a political answer. It's just simply I want you to demonstrate what Russia's been doing for hundreds of years. How many of you know the name Brittany Griner? Almost every hand goes up. I said, how many of you know the name Viktor Bout? Hardly anybody does. I said, you know what? They're so good at low intensity conflict. They're so good at operating in the gray spaces, outside of policy that doesn't invoke a full response. I said, that's what Viktor Bout did for a living until he opened his mouth on a TV show. But he was so far below the radar. He's supplying guns and arms, but he's not a name on the news.
Absolutely.
Nobody knows who this guy was.
Right. And if it wasn't for a movie, and a book or something, like people, still wouldn't have context for what this guy represented and all of the bad stuff that he was doing around the world. And unfortunately, he only got a 25-year jail sentence. And part of that was because the judge, from what I was told, the judge thought that we might have been on the border of kind of entrapping him.
Yeah, we went through that with Zach. He was not happy with it was a female judge. Can't remember her name, but she was not happy with DEA over that. Yeah.
Right. So he didn't get a life sentence. So he only got a 25-year sentence. So even when Griner was released, he was only going to do a few more years.
Yeah. Oh, well, anyway, okay. But I think the point we're making here too, if you piggyback off of Zach's episode, you realize, and I didn't know enough about it then. I wish I had, because we would have gone into more detail, but we were talking just about the SOD operation. But like you say, no matter even where you would go or other places, even like when the feds would come in to work with state and local law enforcement, you still got to have relationships in place. You got to know the lay of the land. You've got to know, because you brought up a very good point. I realized when I was a state trooper and a detective, we did stuff with ATF, FBI, everything. The people who had the best information were the people on the ground. Who had the best information? You folks in Thailand. You had the relationships. You knew how it worked, and that's interesting. Now, did the guy from DOJ think that he got played on this, or that you went above his head?
All I do know that he was incredibly stressed out that he had to handle this case. because he had to, those hearings every other month or so.
Yeah.
He had to go, and he had to be, walk hand in hand with his Thai counterpart, the Thai prosecutors, and try to make this thing happen. And I guess he probably didn't want his resume to lose to a second arms trafficking case on his resume.
Yeah, I bet you were on his Christmas card list, right?
He went to work for Facebook. He went to get a huge job for Facebook, ironically.
Oh, talk about being under stress.
Yeah.
Okay. Hey, well, let's talk about, because that was interesting, but there's another case we want to get to, and you called it Project Synergy, but
Right.
But to get to that, you left Thailand. Where did you go after Thailand, and what was the context? Before we get into Project Synergy, where were you at when this project came about?
I was reassigned. I finished my tour, and I was reassigned back at the DEA Special Operations Division. It was my second tour working at the DEA.
Were you there with Derek Maltz?
Oh yeah,
Derek.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Derek, Murph, come here, Murph. I got something for you, Murph.
No, that's
absolutely.
He never called me that. He called me you effing hillbilly.
Billy.
Yeah.
We all went out to lunch with Derek one time too. We've had him on the show too. Let me tell you, you want to see under the definition of passion in the dictionary, it's got his picture there, what he's doing with fentanyl and everything. But so let's talk about Project Synergy. Then you're back at headquarters now, so you're the big cheese, right? I mean, you get to oversee things at SOD. How does this come about, and what is it?
So at the time, I was an assistant special agent in charge at SOD, heading up the pharmaceutical, chemical, and internet investigation section. And at SOD, one of our at the Special Operations Division, one of our roles is to deconflict simultaneous investigations, use special tools to exploit those investigations, and to provide leads and coordinate seemingly disparate investigations to the field, to coordinate with the field these cases. So at that particular time, we had a lot of different cases, and sometimes we call them operations that my staff coordinators were supporting. And what we found that there was a lot of young adults or teenagers who were having adverse reactions to synthetic drugs, to a synthetic drug called K2 or spice, also known as fake weed, and another synthetic drug that was being abused, just not as much volume, was the cathinones, also called bath salts, even though it didn't have anything to do with anyone taking a bath. But some of the people were going into psychosis, so we found these people ended up in their hospital emergency room. And what we found was these drugs was legal and being sold in convenience stores for about $20 in little Mylar packs with cartoon characters on the outside, so that these drugs would be attractive to young people.
See, I want to stop you right there. See, that when they were doing stuff with fentanyl or some of the other stuff, it's this marketing to kids that just pisses me off. I mean, how this is allowed to go. I mean, I know we'll get into that, but that you just kind of hit a hot button, because I look at all of the stuff where it's designed to appeal to these kids, and it's just like, man, we don't need to worry about losing a war or anything. We're just going to, with the impact that it's happening to our kids and that's growing up, that's all it's going to take.
So, long story short, we're seeing, not only do we have these young folks going to the emergency room, we're starting to seeing a lot of these drugs were being sold in convenience stores operated by Middle Easterners with different ethnicities. It was Lebanese, Syrians, Pakistanis, Yemenis, to name a few. And we started to see a pattern of tens of millions of dollars going to these places, to countries like Yemen, where there is no significant infrastructure, right? And it was the belief that some of the proceeds were being used to fund extremism. And we actually had enough information to know that it was true, including the words of those who we later arrested. And we had one case in Alabama in which the great nephews of a terrorist who was implicated in an attack on the USS Cole was sending the great nephews were sending millions of dollars to this person in Yemen. And
that's Al Shabat, isn't it?
No, this is Sheikh Zindani, and Sheikh so this is he was one of the spiritual advisors of Osama bin Laden. So he's considered possibly responsible for the bombing of the USS Cole. And on October 12th of 2000, in which 17 U.S. servicemen were killed while refueling at the Yemeni port of Aden. And so in addition, we were seeing, and this thing was very nefarious. So we're also seeing 1 kilogram express mail packages coming into the United States from China with this white powder. This was this K2 white powder. And that white powder would be liquefied in acetone and then sprayed on about 15 to 17 kilograms of a benign organic leaf. And that leaf was coming into the country from Mexico and Europe by the ton. And the sheer volume that we were dealing with these drugs was incredible, and the amounts of money that were generated was huge. So based on 1 kilo of this powder from China, you could generate $300,000 conservatively. $300,000 conservatively.
How much would a kilo like that go for?
Well, about $1,500.
So $1,500 becomes $300. There's your next investment. Forget cryptocurrency.
Right.
Yeah, what a return on investment, right?
And if I made a mistake, I said Al-Shabaab is actually Somalia, not Yemen. But.
Yeah, right.
You know, and here we go. This sounds like modern day. Let's see. Oh, the Chinese are providing stuff to the Mexicans, and they're in cohorts. They're in compliance with each other to kill Americans. Damn! I thought this just started. How did this happen?
The word you were thinking of, Murph, was cahoots. They're in cahoots.
Thank you.
So, and because of the hospitalizations, we had to emergency schedule these drugs as illegal. And the Chinese chemists producing the powder would tweak the molecular structure so that the product was no longer illegal. Because in order to have a legal drug, you have to have the product, you have to test it, and it has to go through an administrative process. And the Chinese scheme, this was the predecessor to fentanyl. You got to remember, this was the fentanyl, as they would manipulate those chemicals also in order to skirt to classifying those drugs as illegal. Then that stuff started. So this was right before fentanyl, because fentanyl is a synthetic drug also.
But they'd already laid the groundwork for distribution, how they were going to do everything. Yes. So by the time fentanyl came out through, they already had everything down pat.
Right. So eventually we had to use the Federal Analog Act to classify all of the like family of drugs as illegal. In order to use that act, the drug has to have a similar chemical makeup and have to have the same or similar pharmacological effect on the user. We end up briefing the Deputy Attorney General, members of Congress, national security staff on this threat. And then we had 2 huge takedowns, $145 million in cash and assets, mostly cash, 45 tons of synthetic packages of spice, 840 kilograms of cathinones of the bath salt. We made 429 arrests, and we did 602 search warrants across the country.
And that's just in the U.S.?
That was in the U.S. It was a small amounts were taken off in Australia, but for the most part, this was the United States. So what was going on back then, people had no clue, but this preceded fentanyl.
Well, hold on a second, because you mentioned something, we were going to talk about it, because you said Project Synergy was a national security issue. And so let's follow that thread for a minute, because anytime you've got millions of dollars going to a country where there's violence going on, you've got terrorist groups or anything like that. What was the national security aspect about this that you can talk about?
Well, and I'll try to be careful in what I say. And it's just like, well, you have the Middle Easterners who are operating the convenience stores. And based on what we know, what they were doing was intentional. This wasn't an accident where they were selling these drugs. In addition, and you have the tens of millions of dollars that were going to the Middle East to fund extremism. And so we had money going into Syria like you wouldn't believe, and it was tens of millions of dollars, and it was not going for any nice purpose. It's going for weapons and things such as that. And so that's what we found. And that's why when we had the great nephews in Alabama of a person who's implicated in the bombing of the USS Cole, these was the kind of things we were talking about behind the scenes. And a lot of it was classified, which I was dealing with back then.
Yeah, I had a chance to meet the Kirk Lippold, who was the captain of the Cole. Met him down at the news bureau a couple of times. Those were interesting discussions about what went on. How long? Let's talk about Project Synergy from the, as you start putting this together, because obviously there's lots of cases going on. But how long did this operation, this investigation take before you were able to make all of these arrests and do all these seizures? How much time did you guys have put in on this?
I know that I think it in a year and a half. It was still going on when I left that assignment, but we arrested some Chinese chemists. We had some operations in which they traveled outside of China, and we were able to get our hands on a couple Chinese chemists. So
did you get the same DOJ guy to do the extradition?
No.
Yeah, probably not.
No. So
I can hear the phone call. Hey, I got another case for you. Get away from me. I work at Facebook now. Doesn't matter.
You're going to hear crickets on that line.
So this thing had a lot of resonance over a course of a year and a half, 2 years, because we were doing a lot of briefings and things such as that.
Yeah, but how much attention did it get at the congressional level? I mean, because at some point you got to change laws, policies, or you got to do something, do more enforcement. Did it get the attention of any members of Congress to where they took action on it?
I can't say that they took a specific action other than the administrations start engaging with the Chinese. Both the administration at that particular time, I can't remember if it was Republican, Democrat, or whatever, but they started engaging with the Chinese as far as bringing to their attention that this stuff is killing people. I even went to China to the U.S. Embassy in Beijing and briefed the staff and ambassador on what was taking place within China, because the U.S. ambassador, they weren't aware of what was going on with this issue.
It's amazing. It's just freaking amazing.
Well, they don't care as long as they are killing Americans by our own hands with all of the fentanyl.
It's chemical warfare.
Hey, look, there is a book, and I've talked about it before. If you want to read it, it'll open your eyes. It's called Unrestricted Warfare. It's by two Chinese officers of the PLA. You can find the genesis for how they do things over the internet or with fentanyl and everything else. They talk about their strategies behind doing stuff like this, because as long as it's self-inflicted, like American drug use is,
right? Absolutely,
it's hard to start a war over that.
Right. So this was a huge issue, and we even briefed the Deputy Attorney General at the time. It was James Cole, and his head was about to explode. He couldn't believe what we were telling him.
Well, I do know that they did change some of the, they got China, quote, to cooperate. I think this is under the Trump administration, to say, hey, look, we're going to outlaw sending fentanyl like directly, but it still made it goes over the dark web. It goes over the internet. It goes to Mexico.
It goes to Mexico.
It's I just saw another article here too. I say some stuff for research I'm doing where there is increased money laundering by China for Mexican drug cartels. I mean, at what point, how do we stop this? Let's talk about that for a second. You've been in the thick of this. If you were HMFIC for a month and you can make the changes, Murph, that means, head MF are in charge. I'm trying to clean. I got in trouble for using the F-bomb a little bit. So HMFIC. That is
what this means, right?
I do know that. And that's one of the words in there. Yes. HM middle finger in charge. Yeah. H middle finger in charge.
There you go.
What would you do different?
You have to address these things as being in our national security interest. So if we had a situation if we thought Al Qaeda was going to do something in the United States, or blow somebody up or kill somebody, we would have a different footing on how we would deal with those issues. And so you need to put in all the tools and resources that you have available throughout our national security command structure. And you have to use this stuff to try to disrupt what's going on. And so it needs to be at that level. And that's kind of what I believe.
Yeah, it's just like back when they declared war on drugs. What a huge misnomer.
Right.
Well, yeah, because they sent two of you to Colombia in a war on drugs there, Murph.
Exactly. And it's just, and that's it. Our politicians have never taken, including the Pentagon, have never taken it serious.
Right.
And I mean, not to get off topic here with Andre's conversation, but, we've talked before about how, before pre-COVID, we spoke to the Senate senior staffers on Capitol Hill, and then the next year, the House senior staffers, as well as some congressmen and congresswomen coming in and listening. And then went to the same year, went to the American Legislative Exchange Conference, the ALEC conference that was being held, where representatives from all 50 states are there for a week-long conference. It was shocking that none of them knew counterfeit medications were coming into our country. shocking. And they would come up and openly express their shock that I've never heard of it. I can't believe this has happened. I've never heard of this.
Right. And that's why I was conducting a tremendous amount of briefings. I was briefing anybody and everybody about this specific threat. And I briefed the Pentagon about this threat. I put some of this in my book that we were talking about later on, but this stuff was a huge national security threat.
You bring up a good point. If I said, hey, we got a suitcase nuke and I got credible information, there's a suitcase, can you believe the amount of resources that would get thrown at that?
Absolutely.
You give me that same suitcase full of fentanyl and I will definitely kill more people with fentanyl than you would with that suitcase nuke. And everybody goes, oh, that's nice. That's interesting. To your point, I'm constantly amazed about how they're not able to flip that switch and realize, dude, it's a slower death, but it's a death, but it's by our own hands.
It's chemical warfare. It's I think it's intentional, and that's just what I believe, and it's been going on for a long time.
Yeah,
very frustrating.
Well, let's talk about something that was less frustrating, working in Jamaica. No, let's talk about, because we wanted to finish up. We kind of set the stage, but you talked about two of the things you wanted to talk about in Africa that you did before we get into talking about your book. So let's talk about that. What is it? When did you do it? What's your sign? What's your major?
I went in 2017. I became a regional director for Africa, and the threat, over the course of my career, this is so different. Tons of heroin now was flowing into East Africa on these dhows or these large fishing boats on the Indian Ocean from the Makran coast of Iran and Pakistan. So the Taliban is taxing the heroin that's coming, that's moving around out of Afghanistan and Pakistan.
And here's the funny part: the Taliban, a lot of the other folks, they will kill you for drugs and stuff until it's funding terrorist activities. Then it's okay.
Right. So, and at the same time, we got that threat in East Africa, and at the same time, we got tons of cocaine that was being smuggled on containers or large boats on the Atlantic Ocean, going from South America to Europe north, just off the west coast of Africa. So, working with host country governments, we were able to seize like tons of both heroin and cocaine. And then one of the cases I wanted to quickly mention is some notorious smugglers. They were called the Akashas, and they were from Pakistan, and they were based in Kenya. And working with two co-conspirators, we eventually arrested them and extradited them to the Southern District of New York. And they were operating in Kenya and smuggling tons of heroin also. And some of the product was going to be distributed in the United States. So we used a Special Operations Division informant. I think we ended up getting a ton of heroin from the Akashas. And they were also involved in trafficking in tons of ivory and rhino horns, and selling arms to Al-Shabaab, a terrorist organization operating in Somalia and Kenya. So once again, you see that transnational organized crime nexus. This thing is just not one thing. These people were also involved in murder. So I just want to bring that to your all's attention. And also, like in Africa, we had like the Lebanese Hezbollah, and so the terrorist group does a lot of money laundering in West Africa. And so when I was the regional director, we arrested a guy in Morocco named Qasim Tajuddin as he was transiting Morocco en route to Guinea from Lebanon. And he owned a lot of property in West Africa. And Tajuddin was a billionaire financier for Hezbollah, a billionaire. And he was wanted for financial crimes in the Southern District of New York. And after we extradited him, he pled guilty. He received a 5-year sentence, and he turned over $50 million to the United States government as part of his plea agreement. Shortly after we arrested Tajuddin, his nephew was arrested in the Gambia with 50 kilograms of cocaine that verified to us the connection between drug trafficking in West Africa and the money laundering of Hezbollah.
This is a tangled web when you start getting into international terrorism and financing and stuff. I mean, when I was doing work down at Department of Justice on information sharing, I've told this to a couple other folks, but Andre too. I worked with some guys from ATF, and one of the things that they were finding a lot of money being diverted on were counterfeit tax stamps on tobacco products. They would sell the product for the full price, but keep the money that would have been the tax, which, by the way, I don't smoke, but for the folks that do, taxes are a big part of the cost of a single pack of cigarettes. Millions of dollars flowing overseas.
The family I was talking about from Alabama, they were doing that also regarding that same thing. That was doing the spice. They were doing the exact same thing you're talking about.
Polycriminal organizations, whatever they can make a buck in,
Exactly.
that's what it's all about.
Exactly.
Yeah. I'm just, you bang your head and you get up. You say the thing is, after a while you go, now let me ask you this, Andre. When you had your final day and you walked out and you realized, I don't have to handle 180 cases at a time anymore, get woke up at 3:00 in the morning. Did you look back now and go, what the hell was I thinking? What did I do this job? I mean,
no, I looked at it as it was my honor to serve our government, and I think that people like me and Steve and yourself, we made impact in a whole lot of folks' lives, and you can't. It's hard to put a number on it. But we've saved a lot of lives. I'm convinced of that.
Well, when you consider the amount of bath salts and other stuff you pulled off and everything else, I mean, how many lives alone could that have taken?
Right. Absolutely.
And it's it's amazing you can even keep up. It's just overwhelming.
It's whack-a-mole. Yeah.
It really is. It really, and I mean, we used to say this tongue in cheek, but we had the best job security in the world.
Yeah, that was a lot different going into the private sector. You're going, hey, where's my work? I don't know. You got to go out and find it, Skippy. We had a joke at SAIC because generals and admirals would retire and they'd go to work for these big defense contractors, but they're always late on their first day of work because they were waiting for their driver to show up. It's like, sorry, Admiral, there are no drivers, and not in the private sector, buddy.
Welcome to the real world.
Welcome to the real world. Well, hey, let's talk about this because you punched out in 2022, right?
21.
21. All right. So you're not even 2 years out yet. So what made you, let's talk about that because I want to get into your book, Truth and Terror, and let's talk about what you're doing now. But was it just time? Did you have enough years in, or were you hitting the mandatory retirement age? What was it?
I was actually extended a couple of years, so I passed the mandatory age, and then I extended a couple of years. They thought that I was doing a decent job. I guess they wanted to keep me around, especially since I was really kind of starting a new region, and so they kept me around for a couple extra years.
Yeah, because normally mandatory retirement's 57, right?
Right, correct.
As a matter of fact, he was going to bring Andre was going to bring Javier and I over to speak at a mini IDEC and mini international drug enforcement conference, and lovely COVID came along.
Where's that going to be at? Where were you going to speak at?
I was going to be in Accra, Ghana. We had a previous conference in the Zambia. What a incredible venue! It was right at Victoria Falls. My hotel room was a 5-minute walk to the falls.
Wow!
And so we had all kind of animals on the property, and even the African. We had more than 30 nations that attended our conference, and even the African counterparts was like, oh, I can't believe this venue because it was giraffes, it was monkeys, it was everything. There was out there. It was really incredible.
Wow! When I was doing stuff for the State Department, I was supposed to go to Kenya and had a conflict. I had to go train somewhere else. And I wanted to go to Kenya, but it worked out for the best. Unfortunately, one of the guys that I was teaching with, leaving the airport, heading to the reservation, they were actually going to be out at a game preserve with this course. Car on the wrong side of the hill, hit the van head on, killed my buddy, injured a bunch of people in the van. And but the pictures, they said, hey, here's where we're going. It was the Kenyan, the rangers, the people out there preventing poaching and stuff. And it was like, the countryside was beautiful, but it just wasn't meant to be. Just one of those bad things. So let's talk about you now. So you punched out. What did you do after you got out? Did you decide I'm just going to take it easy? Did you hop back into the private sector? What'd you do?
I started writing a book, and I also started an LLC called Executive Worldwide Solutions. So I've done some part-time work with that as a consultant, but I really wanted to write a book, and some people didn't think I was going to do it. But
you've written enough reports. Writing a book was, after that long memo in Thailand, writing a book was easy, right?
So I had all these experiences that I had kind of wanted to consolidate it, and that's why I kind of made it semi-autobiographical. I didn't want to have to jump through the hoops to try to get it approved, especially some of it being possibly classified and stuff like that. So I just really wanted to do that, and that was the main thing I did. And I wanted to tell a story what it was really like with our career, because I've gotten great reviews on the book, and I'm proud that I wrote it. But the reason I wrote it was to kind of chronicle what a DEA agent does, and all you hear about is the failed war on drugs. Well, from our perspective, our war is not it's not against a chemical or a drug product, because people are always going to find a way to kind of get high, that's not winnable. So the true war is against the drug cartels and transnational organized crime, and from my perspective, and if that's what most folks thought about, they would see DEA in a better light. DEA has done a great job dismantling, as Steve knows, he was a participant in dismantling the Medellin and Cali cartels in Colombia. That's the real war, because if dog crap could get people high, people are going to use that. You can never win against
people's addictions,
Yeah, exactly. So obviously we have to do more work in Mexico to go after some of those cartels. But I put my money on DEA, and that's kind of why I wrote the book. I wanted people to realize that this threat is just not going after the local street corner guy in the communities. This is a global threat, and I wanted people to have that appreciation for it, and that's why I wrote it. And that's exactly why I wrote it.
Well, and after I read the book, Truth and Terror, a drug enforcement story, that's, I called Morgan and said, hey, we got another name for the list here, because we keep a list of potential guests on the show. And so the reason I'm saying this is I'm endorsing your book 100%. It was an excellent read. It's one of those books that's hard to put down. It's not an extensive read. You're not reading War and Peace, but it's exciting throughout.
Well, let's talk about that book for a second. So how long did it take you to write it?
It took me about 7-8 months to write it. And when I started, it just kind of poured out of me. I used the editor, so it was a learning process for me. But it really
had to get rid of the cop speak too, because now you're writing a book, not a report, not a DEA.
Oh my God, you just don't know how because you're absolutely right. That's a problem. Just like you're writing a law enforcement DEA report, that you want to use the same words simultaneously, subsequently, and all this crap.
Yep. all that legalese bullshit.
Yeah. So now, how did you go about? So let's talk about that too. So as you're laying this out, some of it's a little bit fictionalized, but all in all, how much does that represent your life? About 50%, 70%?
A lot. It's like it might be 80%, because even the stuff that we talked about in this podcast from my childhood, that stuff actually happened, and I put it in the book, and that's what we started this podcast talking about. And so. Yeah.
What's not in the book is what we talked about before we started the podcast, which we won't mention, but there's still even to this day, there's still some sensitivities over some of the stuff. If the names came out, it could cause some issues, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it could be very problematic with some of the stuff that we were doing. And
but not for you. You're retired.
No, not for me. Not for me.
It'd be somebody else's headache, some DOJ lawyer now.
Yeah.
Oh, well, so let's talk. So when you got it, who published it for you?
I self-published, and so
congrats, man.
Yeah, I self-published, and that's why it's available on Amazon. I'm actually in the process of writing another book right now, and I'm gonna go about that one differently. I'm going to seek a publisher. That first one was a learning process for me, but I've learned enough now that I'm actually not using the editor at this point. But it's taken me longer to write it because I'm reviewing and reviewing and reviewing. So it is a learning process. And then yesterday, I had a 2-hour Zoom meeting with some folks to collaborate on a book about Africa and some of the threats there. So they want to work with me on doing another book. So actually in a couple of years, I might, if I'm fortunate, I might have 3 books that are out there that people could purchase.
And you thought you'd retire and get away from all this paperwork, huh?
Right. It's pretty cool to put down on paper some of the things that you think about and that you want to express, and that it's something that I wanted to do years before I retired, and people who knew my background and knew I had all this vast experience in all these different countries, they would always say to me, "You need to write a book. You need to write a book." They didn't know that I always was thinking to myself, "I'm going to write a book."
It's funny because in DEA the paperwork is unbelievable. And it's funny because when task force officers come over and join DEA, that's what they all have in common. It's like, I've never seen such paperwork, but there's a reason for it. And the cool thing is, you become very good at writing. And some of us better. Yeah, some of us better than others, because I tried writing our book, and what a bunch of crap.
Yeah, Murph's first version was Saul Pablo, got him killed. We went back to the U.S. Yeah,
it's like I saw a meme for a canine last night on social media, and he's doing his report and said, "Saul bad guy, bit same, end of report."
Yeah. Short, sweet, to the point. So, hey, let's talk about real quick, though, about your LLC. What kind of gigs are you getting on your LLC, the type of work you're doing?
Well, it's these people sometimes are looking for contracts with the government, and so they need some of the intricacies of how to get certain things done, and that's the type of stuff that I've done. And it hasn't been a lot, but it's just been a couple of occasions. So they signed me to a non-disclosure agreement and a contract, and I help them with some of the wording on what they need to. The government language, some of the speak.
That's where your government language comes in handy, not in the book, but in doing contracts with the government.
Yeah. And helping them realize what resources are out there, and how to make things happen. And so that's the type of work I've been doing. And it hasn't been a lot, but it has been some.
Been some interesting stuff. Well, and look, you're in a great place to do it too. I mean, this area of Northern Virginia, you can throw a rock and hit 100 defense contractors,
right.
or do stuff like that.
Right.
So, well, this is pretty cool. So let's finish up with like just real quickly too. You talked about your kids survived all of these moves and stuff. They did some international schools. What kind of work are they doing now?
Well, my oldest son, he's a special agent with the State Department for Diplomatic Security. And my daughter, she was a teacher. She's married a doctor living in Europe. And and my youngest son, he's selling software in the Virginia area.
And making more money than all of us.
Not quite, but he's doing pretty well. He did a lot better graduating from college than I did. A lot better.
Now, your oldest son, is he stationed overseas yet, or is he still?
Right now, he's domestically, but he's got his early next year. He's moving to a foreign office, to a foreign post. I won't say at this particular time because he might kill me.
Is it a free country or is it a communist country?
It's a free country.
Free country. Yeah. So I did stuff. Well, I was part of DSS, but the Anti-Terrorism Assistance Program. So I was an outside advisor to them. But yeah, we worked with a lot of the DSS guys. You want to go to places like Pakistan? I can give you good places not to go. I don't know the good places to go. Although the British Embassy is about the only place you can get a decent beer in Islamabad. The ones they tried to serve us in the American Embassy, these Coronas that looked like about 3 years old, and the limes were even older than that. It was so shriveled up. I'm going, how long has that been around? I don't know. Do you want it or not? Yeah.
And that brings up another question, Andre. And the different countries you were in, were the Canadians, they have a Canadian embassy in those places?
It was the Canadian High Commissions, I think, or something like that. Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I can't remember if it was Embassy or High Commissions, but yeah, I've worked with a lot of those folks around the world. Yeah.
Did they have the bars in their offices like they did in Colombia? They had the best bar in Bogota.
I don't remember that. I remember obviously going to quite a few diplomatic functions, but it wasn't with the RCMP, the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. It was specifically when I went to those things. It was like at the High Commissioner or the Ambassador. I think it was High Commissioners and stuff that we were invited to a lot of diplomatic functions.
And those are the kind of functions you have to stay sober. I mean, you're there working. You're not there socializing.
As my friends at CIA do too. A lot of them go to these things. Did you ever drink? No. They drank later, not during the. Hey, before you go though, we have to ask you a couple things. So, did you ever have to write a memo in the academy?
Not a lot.
Wait a minute, not a lot. Okay.
No, I'm serious about that because I was like, man, I was really focused when I was there, man. And one of the things that I remember is it was like. Years later and decades later, and I was so focused, and because I couldn't afford to lose that. I had to make it. I given up my job. Nobody in my family ever had a job like this. I had to make it. And years later, I was hearing about some of my classmates. They were having affair, sexual rendezvous, and stuff like that. And I was like, I had no idea, and it's like it's crazy.
Did you have Kutza in your class?
Yeah, he was in my class. Yes.
Yeah, he's a hoot, man.
Yeah, he is.
He's a guy that you guys were ahead of us by I think we started in June. I think you guys had only been there a couple of weeks, maybe. And so, during
we started in the beginning. Because I went to processing with DEA Chicago at the end of May, and then it was 2 weeks after that we started in BA 52.
Yeah, so I think you guys had 2 weeks seniority on us. And so, during classroom sessions, every hour you get a break and we'd all stand around the hallway, and Cootsie used to come around and he really took being an upperclassman serious,
He was the oldest person in our class too.
Was he?
He was the oldest person.
I mean, he's a tough guy.
And he was voted the number one student in our class. And he was the oldest person. Tim Cootsie.
Yeah. When we got to be friends later in our careers, but Tim would come over to our class and they told you couldn't lean up against the wall. You couldn't stand around with your hands in your pockets. Your pants had to be bloused inside your boots and all that. And he come over and try to tune us up about our appearance or our hands in your pockets. It's like, dude, you're in the same boat we are here. You're nobody special. But later on in life, we got to be good friends. And
he's a great dude. He came from Fish and Wildlife. He spent a lot of his career in Quantico as a firearms instructor.
Yeah, he caught, and that's how we got to be friends, because I think I probably trained under him. But he's out busting our chops, and it's like, go catch somebody that doesn't have a fishing license. Go do something important. Leave us alone.
So, with all the countries you were in, Andre, there had to be a stupid criminal that still you think of, right? What was the stupidest thing you ran into in one of these countries?
Oh man! In the U.S., the two women they tried to. We did a reverse undercover operation, and they brought me like $50,000. 2 women to buy cocaine from me, and then we arrested them, and they were really pissed.
Not as pissed as the deputies in Riverside that did a 60-kilo meth deal, and the guy had the 60. Why they used real meth? 60 kilos of meth, and they lost the guy.
Oh my God! Yeah, you don't want to do that.
No, that's borderline criminal behavior right there.
Boy, it's one thing to lose dope, but to lose $50,000 in cash.
Yeah, so these couple of these women they brought me because I had this look like I said earlier in my career, I'm wearing my Bill Cosby sweaters.
I'm sorry. I don't know if I can take you serious or not. I'm America's dad. Look at me in my sweater.
I put in a nice car. Here they come with that money, man. I'm like, I'll take it. And I remember one of them fighting so bad. And I remember one of the agents rolling around on the ground with this big black female and shit,
She was probably kicking his ass, right?
She was. Lucky the troops were there to help him.
Oh God. Well, there's no shortage of that kind of stuff. Well, hey, look, let's close out by doing this. First of all, the one thing we didn't close out on was your Marine Corps reserve career. What'd you do there?
I was an infantry. I was just a grunt.
Well, everybody's infantry in the Marine.
No, but that was my military occupation. I was a grunt, and so that's what I did. And then I got a chance to go to Norway, Arctic weather training, and I finished up what was called they called it state platoon, surveillance and target acquisition. So we were repelled, and they dropped us behind enemy lines, and then you call in our. And we weren't. I wasn't in actual war, so we would call in airstrikes as far as So that's what I was. That's when I finished up my career in the Marine Corps. It's called surveillance and target acquiffition state platoon in the Marine Corps.
How many years did you have?
I did like 5 years and stuff like that. So.
Here, and I mean, we're coming to the end of this interview here, and I just want to kind of recognize Andre because you're a true American success story here. You came up in a challenging childhood in a very dangerous city where it would have been very easy to get affiliated with the wrong people. And you overcame all that. Your parents, whether they were, it sounds like your mom was trying to be helpful and your dad was a challenge, but you went to college successfully. You had a focus. And that's the cool thing about, in my opinion, and I don't mean this to sound as I'm being braggadocious or anything, but that's one thing you see that makes DEA successful is our people have very strong work ethics. They have the ability to focus on a mission, and they have the ability to adapt to the conditions around them, whether it's here in the United States or other countries, and be successful. And that's why I would love to promote DEA more and more. It just seems like.
Well, you know what the FBI does better than the DEA? They get more TV shows. They get more TV shows. Yeah,
exactly.
Hey, but we would be remiss. I was trying to lead to this earlier. We would be remiss. You ended up your career. You were a recipient of the Meritorious Presidential Rank Award signed by the President of the United States. How did that come about?
Yeah, I mean, I actually was told by the deputy administrator a year or so before that they had put me in for it, but because I retired when I did, I didn't think I was going to get it. I just thought, yeah, okay. And I was kind of brokenhearted by it because I felt like, oh boy, I thought that would be something really cool to have and really be the nice way to top my career off. And the administrator Ann Milgram called me and told me I was the recipient of that award, and that was pretty cool, and I was just really proud of myself for that. And and it goes to show you that all that hard work that I did over the course of my career, it was appreciated, and that's what made it so special. It really made it special, and they were been on pause. They hadn't given out those awards for a few years under the last administration. No one was getting those awards, so I was really happy. I didn't think I was going to get it.
Fantastic. You know what? You earned it. You deserved it.
And this is us saluting you there, Marine Infantry Grunt, DEA, acting. What were you acting regional director
in Bangkok? Yeah,
in Bangkok, yeah,
unpaid acting regional.
Yeah,
just not paid at the regional director level. Yeah, no, great stuff, man. Great stories. Love getting the backstory on this. And you guys, we'll put this on our website too. Go to truthandterror.com. We'll put the book on there. It's available on Amazon. And you got to make sure when you get your next one out, you got to let us know. We'll put it up there on the website. I guarantee you, we're going to get you 2 sales. I promise you, we're going to send your book through the roof. Murph's not one of them.
Here's the first one.
We're 50% of the way there. No, we're going to get people love our book list. We've got probably we're going on this 96 episodes was released this week, and we probably have. I mean, with the episodes that have books, we probably at least have 50 episodes that have books, but some of them have multiple books. So, well, you are an esteemed company, my friend. So
well, I'm so grateful and so appreciative of you all giving me opportunity and to tell some of these war stories and to talk about my career. And it's always good to get with my man Steve Murphy, who I love that guy to death for a long time, and so it's great to see him and stuff.
Brother, it's been an honor having you on here, Andre. So thank you very much for taking the time.
Absolutely.
All right. You guys don't go anywhere. Everybody else, stay tuned for the debrief. See, there we go. The hardest working man. He was the hardest working man at DEA. I tell you what, he worked a heck of a lot working with the special operations guys on Viktor Bout. I mean, the stuff he had to do to pull together so that they could come in there, and make this case work.
You know what? He may, and I love the way he told that story because he's not trying to take the credit away from anybody. But man, what an eye opener when you live in these countries and agents come, to work in your area of responsibilities. It all lays on your shoulders. I mean, they can't even get to the hotel from the airport without your assistance. So it's up to them, as Andre explained to us, to figure out all the logistics, use all the contacts that they've developed in these different countries to make things successful. So I'm glad that, people love to, when I was in Miami, the guys in New York loved to come down in January and February. And it was pretty much the same thing. You had to take care of these guys, but that's the right thing to do also.
Yeah.
So just loved your story, Andre, and I can't tell you how much appreciate your book is fantastic. We highly encourage you to get the book.
Truth and Terror.
Truth and Terror, a drug enforcement story by Andre Kellum.
And you will find it at truthandterror.com. You will also find it on our book page list. As we put it up there with all of the other ones. So, I mean, we got a ton of books on there. Mm-hmm. And this was a good one, guys. We hope you enjoyed it because here's a man who came from very humble and tough beginnings, went to college in a taxi. That's how he got to college.
Great story.
Oh, great story. But we hope you guys enjoyed that. If you did, head on over to Apple, Spotify, hit those 5 stars. Let us know what you think about it. I mean, we're building some great stories here, and it takes your help to help us get that story out there so other people can hear it. So head on over Apple, Spotify, hit those 5 stars. Also head on over to GameOfCrimesPodcast.com for more information about the show and the book page. Get the link to Truth and Terror, a drug agent story. Make sure you download that. Make sure you buy it. Make sure you support Andre. We just love it when these guys come on with their books, guys and girls, and we consistently update it. Follow us on social media at Game of Crimes on Twitter, Game of Crimes Podcast on Facebook and the Instagram. Also, Game of Crimes fans, just go there. Our favorite mafia queen, Sandy Salvato, lets you into the inner sanctum. Also, Patreon, patreon.com/Game of Crimes. We have a ton of stuff. We've got as much or more content on Patreon as we do on our free podcast. And by the way, Murph,
yes,
we're going to be doing something. We've had 2 requests. I'm announcing it. This is a world announcement. I'm going to figure out how to do it. It's going to take a little work. But we've actually had a lot of people say, hey, look, we'd like to listen to the podcast episodes, but without, the ads and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Because we create the file, then we upload it, then that's when the ads and everything get into it. So I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to start uploading episodes for our patrons. And now I have to figure it out, though, because, see, we have 3 levels. We have our Evil is Coming.
Mm-hmm.
We have Guardian of the Realm and Warden of the Throne. And so I need to think through that with you a little bit, because I think, we've got to make it worth it that when you're paying the extra money that you get the extra benefits. So
right.
There's a couple ways to do that, but we definitely are going to do that. Just have to figure out how to do it, make it, fair for the folks who are paying extra money. How do we do that? But we'd like a lot of folks to get access to it. So I have a couple ideas we're going to work through, but just want to let you know we've had it raised up, several times now. So
Excellent.
We're going to work on it.
I love that idea. And, we and I, back when we first started Game of Crimes, we talked about how we do that. And here we are, over a year and a half later. Guess it's time to do something, right? Nothing slow about us.
But no, but the other thing that too is you wait till people say, yeah, we want it now that, hey, we want to, it's a little extra work, which is not the problem. The problem is making sure that there's people who want it. Why build something if nobody wants it? It's not if you build it, will they come? It's, they want us, they're saying, hey, we want to do this. So we're doing it. This, right. I was about to say this Bud's for you, but we ain't going there though. So this podcast is for you.
That doesn't mean the same thing as it used to.
Doesn't mean the same thing. Well, hey guys, we hope you enjoyed it. And once again, we thank you guys for supporting us. We thank you guys for doing that. Sharing these episodes, giving us all the comments, the feedbacks. And we thank you guys once again for playing that biggest, baddest, most dangerous, and laid back, which is not similar to James Brown, kind of working hard on the podcast, Game of Crimes.